what's up? You're just in time for a weekly chat here in my podcast. Hello, this is Justin, and I share a lot of stories, a lot of life hacks, tips, things you need to know about a foreigner's life here in South Korea. And today's topic is very interesting because as I am conceptualizing this topic, I have so many things to say. In Filipino, we call it hugot because I have a lot of topics to share and probably a lot of information to give you. Because as a foreigner living here in South Korea, I experienced becoming a student, a Global Korea Scholarship awardee, managing my finances for at least 1 million Korean won per month for a span of 3 years, to be 3 years. And then I have been working here in South Korea for almost 2 years now with my salary. And the hardest thing, to be honest, to do here in South Korea is actually budgeting. So today, I'll be sharing with you some of the struggles I experienced as a foreigner in South Korea when it comes to my finances. That's one. Two, I'll be giving you some tips in order to be able to survive here in South Korea as a foreigner and things that you can do to be able to manage your finances effectively. So let's go. As I've said, I have been a student here in South Korea for almost 3 years, 1 year for the Korean language and then 2 years for my master's program. In that 3 years, I have received allowance from the Korean government under the Global Korea Scholarship Program, and I was able to survive. I'm still here, so that's a proof that I survived. So for the 3 years, I received 1 million Korean won. And some of you might be thinking, for a student, that's actually big enough. And I was able to compare it to some of my Korean colleagues and Korean friends. And yeah, the reality is 1 million Korean won is a big amount of money, considering that you have to pay for your own um ho- not hotel, you have to pay for your dormitory, you have to pay for your insurance, you have to pay for everything. So with the Global Korea Scholarship Program, the package is 1 million Korean won. You have to budget and pay for everything. The Korean government will just give you the money and then it's you who will be budgeting everything. So in the past 3 years, like 2021 to 2024, that was my lifeline. All the things I've done, all the things I bought, all the things I've able to attain to travel, these are a combination of my allowance plus some of my earnings from my part-time jobs. So my laptop, the one I'm using for my work and my studies before, this MacBook Air is a fruit of my labor. Even the phones I have, so my S24 Ultra is also from my job. But the thing is, the 1 million Korean won is split into a lot of expenses. As mentioned, you have to pay for your dormitory, your other expenses, and such. So, nothing. After a month, 1 million minus the expenses, which is equivalent to 1 million as well, you'll be left with nothing. So, for students, this is the scenario. It's a struggle. You really have to find part time jobs in order for you to gain some items, some equipment, some books. These things are very expensive here in South Korea. Living in South Korea is very expensive to begin with. But if you're a student with only allowance, it's more challenging. And then some of my friends and probably have experienced sending money back to my home country, which is a struggle. So again, that's part of life. That's part of the Korean government scholarship program. That's how it's functioning. You're not supposed to use your money for enjoyment. You're supposed to use it for studies, for books, conferences, and such. But you cannot really take away the responsibility of some people, and then they really have to send money back to their home country, especially if you're not from a well-off family. So those things, those experiences happen here in South Korea. If you're that kind of person, that's one thing that you have to consider if you want to go here for studies. Because again, there are limitations when it comes to your part-time jobs. Depending on your Korean language skill, you can get as much as 40 working hours a week if your Korean language is good. But if it's not, you're limited to at least 20 hours. And aside from that, again, some of the companies won't really hire foreigners if you don't speak the language. That's why it's a prerequisite for you to be able to find jobs here in South Korea if you'll be able that you can speak the language. English is an extra, but Korean language is the basic. You really need to speak Korean if you want to stay and live and work here in South Korea. That's like a common knowledge. So if you're a student, that's a struggle. Budgeting is a struggle. If you're working, like what I am currently experiencing now, I've been working in the Korean Association, so I receive my salary. That's a different story. Because technically, I receive at least three times the money I've been receiving from my scholarship, and that's the money I receive for my salary. And same thing, I pay for my dormitory, my house, my one room, my food, my travels, my expenses, my insurance, my phone plan, the internet, the water, my eating out, my gym, everything. My medical expenses, my supplements, everything. I have to pay for it. And I just want to pinpoint that the bottom line of all these things is that living in South Korea is very expensive. And if you're planning to go to South Korea alone, I think 2.5 million Korean won to 3 million Korean won is sufficient. You'll be able to enjoy life. You'll be able to send money in your home country. You'll be able to occasionally travel and buy some luxuries from time to time. But if you're using the 2.5 to 3 million Korean won for a household of three, nope, you cannot do that. That's not possible. It's not survivable. That's something that you have to consider if you have families and you decide to go to South Korea. So again, that's the reality of the salary. The minimum wage I think is like around 2.2 million Korean won. So I'm earning a bit above the minimum wage, but again, since I'm single, I don't have a family that I have to feed here in South Korea and I just have to send money to my home country, it's relatively easier for me to manage my finances. Spending money here in South Korea. Okay, I'll give you a rundown of my monthly expenses. So let's go with, for example, the one room I'm currently staying at. I pay around 400,000 Korean won. And then for my family in the Philippines, I pay around, let's say, 250,000 Korean won. So that's already on 650. And then for food, I usually allot around 500 to, let's say, 450,000 to 500. So dorm, my one room, my family in the Philippines, and then food alone, that's almost 1 million Korean won. So where does the 1.5 Korean won goes? So the remaining money I pay. So aside from the food, I also allot at least 500,000 Korean won for eat out. The food grocery is different from eat out, especially here in South Korea. So you really have to set aside some money for that kind of activity. So 500,000 is for eat out, and it also includes some of my leisure activities, some of my expenses. For example, I want to play volleyball outside, I would pay around 10,000 Korean won. So let's set that 500,000. So now the remaining money for me to spend is around 1 million Korean won because my take home pay is around 2.5. So within the 1 million Korean won, I would set aside around 500,000 Korean won for my investments. So what I do is I actually send money to the Philippines and invest in stocks. And then the remaining 500,000 Korean won is something I spend here in South Korea. Probably I save here in South Korea. So I would save up money and then put it in some interest in high yield savings account here in South Korea. So that has been my strategy. High yield savings account here in South Korea and also high yield savings account in the Philippines. So aside from my investments in stocks, I also do save up my emergency fund in the Philippines and save up emergency fund here in South Korea. That could be a struggle at first. And that could be the same case for you guys who still have family in your home country and then you want to go to South Korea to start a new life, but cannot really uproot everything in your home country. So you still have to save money and send money there. So that could be the scenario for you. And now this is where I'll be entering to my tips and guide on how to be able to manage your finances and budget effectively here in South Korea. The way I do it is, again, I divide my emergency funds here in South Korea and the Philippines as well, and do investments in the Philippines. So at least from the moment that I decide to go back to my home country, I have a working capital or working money that I can use in order for me to survive. Because again, life in the Philippines could be very, very expensive, especially if you don't have an income or money coming in, everything going out. That could be very costly. So that's has been what I'm starting to build now that I'm already approaching the second year in my career as an employee here in South Korea. Aside from developing my stocks and then strengthening my emergency fund in my high yield savings account, I also want to build some cushion here in South Korea. So the best place for me to be able to save up money is I use a TOS, that's a bank here in South Korea, a digital bank here in South Korea. It gives daily interests. So if you're here in South Korea deciding to go here and stay here for a bit long period of time, I highly recommend the TOS app wherein you can just um, everything is in the phone. You can transfer money, receive money. You can use it to spend money overseas and such. So I use the TOS app to get my savings. So in terms of my money logic, I received my salary from Kungmin Bank. That's one of the banks I got since I arrived here in South Korea. I assigned that as my salary bank. So I have one bank. And then the second bank I use is the TOS, wherein I use for movements of cash from in and out. And then my all of my expenses, my purchases are all going through credit card. I rarely use debit card for expenses. I always try using credit card. For the sole being that I want to earn mileage for my travels. And then it's easier for me to contest, or how do you call that? To go to the bank, to the credit card company and say, for example, I want to reverse a payment or probably I would like to report a fraud. It's easier for me to do that because at least I'm protected if I have some evidences that I did not do these transactions. So that's possible. Again, foreigners here in South Korea are entitled and allowed to get some credit cards depending on their salary and depending on their how do you call this, if they're member of that specific bank or not. So for my case, I was able to get some credit card from IBK, and through that IBK credit card, I'm able to access airport lounge. So I continuously used this credit card for all of my major transactions. For example, my LASIK surgery, which costed me like around 1.7 million Korean won, and then my appendectomy, which costed me around 1.6 Korean won, 1.6 million Korean won. So all of my major expenses are under the credit card because I was able to do it's in Korean, it's called halbo, meaning you have to pay or divide it per, for example, for 4 months. So the 1.7 divided by 4, likewise the 1.6 divided by 4. And that has been the tip I've been using in order to do my money logic. All expenses are in the credit card, all transfers in TOS, and then my money receiving from salary is from Cookmin. And then that's how it goes. Like insurances are deducted directly from my salary amount, my salary bank, to make it more safe. So at least I am sure that in the end of the month, I'll be able to pay that insurance. Likewise, my credit card is directly linked to my working money, sorry, to my salary account. Therefore, every fifth of the month, it will get deducted automatically. So sometimes it really pays off that you pay your money, your expenses through credit card, since in South Korea we receive tax refunds. The more you spend, the more you get refund. Because again, the refund calculator is based on your expenditure. So yeah, that's how I manage my finances. So some people, what works for them is that you save up the money before you land with the different expenses, right? Like for example, they would set aside 500,000 Korean won first before setting aside budget for each. But for my case, what works is that I manage my expenditures. Like I would watch myself and check, okay, I think I'm spending too much. I will avoid spending more than 15,000 Korean won per day. Regardless of what I spend, coffee, snack, kimbap, bakery, it should be less than 50,000 Korean won a day. I will not be monitoring like how much I spend each day. It's more of just on the credit card, I'll be able to see, okay, I spent around 15,000 won per day. That's for me, if I spent less than 15,000 won, that's a milestone. If I spent around 20,000 Korean won, I would just make sure that by tomorrow, I'll only spend around 10,000 Korean won. That has been my logic. I'm not sure if it's working, but I think it is working because I'm saving up money in my bank accounts here in South Korea, but also in the Philippines. And all of my bonuses coming from my company goes directly to the savings in the Philippines and in South Korea at the same time in my investments. So I don't usually count them as part of my salary. So bonuses are technically just bonuses, and then sometimes I would get money from this bonus when it comes to purchasing immediate purchases. For example, tickets, airfare tickets. If I decide to travel sometime, if I'm burnt out, I want to go explore some place, I'll just use a portion of my bonus and then go for the travel. Again, life here in South Korea could be very, very expensive. But again, it's up to you to be able to manage all of these things. And I'm sure that you already have your money habits. You really have to adjust it to depending on where you are and depending on to which country you're staying. In South Korea, that could be very, very difficult to manage and with a lot of temptation, skincare, concerts, travels. That could be very, very hard to manage. But it's more of a willpower. And then I'll go back to what I mentioned in my first few episodes for this, just in time for chat. You always have to ask your why and always to keep in mind this why you're here in South Korea, why are you trying to have a new life, why are you here working. If you keep that in mind, I think managing money could be very, very easy, could be a very easy task for you. And if you have other topics that you want me to discuss, feel free to share them in the chat, in the comment section, and I would be glad to talk about that in my next few videos. But till then,